If you're spending 3 hours documenting a 1-hour patient encounter, you probably think you're the bottleneck. Well, you're not. The real bottleneck is your software. Most engineers put things together in software companies for billing and compliance and documentation, and they were never designed for a relationship with your patient. So functional medicine, integrative medicine, like a cash practice, they weren't designed to help patients understand their health story either. So I built Esprē after watching functional medicine practitioners lose thousands of hours fighting their software that was actually working against them. And the platform wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem was they were designed for somebody else's practice, somebody else's style. So it looks like a bargain EHR on paper. It becomes incredibly expensive. I mean, cheap for a minute, and then it gets really, really expensive as the hidden costs show up in incredible frustration, which you've heard about. I read the chat lines and stuff from different feeds, and the number one complaint I see, and it's ridiculous, is my EMR is horrible. It's terrible. And it's true, but it's remediable or can be remedied, right? Your staff burns out. Charting seems like it's your job. That's what you mostly do, right? Everybody, and this is something we see all the time, doctors are great at working around. You know, if the patient has a bad problem and you don't have the right suture, you'll find one that's close, right? So that's how you do that. People do it with their EMRs too. And they're completely consumed with workarounds for the EMR, which is ridiculous. It shouldn't happen. And that doesn't help the patients understand things better either. I mean, the EMR's got a horrible portal. It doesn't really help communicate the story. And before we changed our life here by building and developing Esprē, that was how our life was too. So the true cost of a cheap EMR, it's not the monthly prescription or subscription. Maybe you'll need a prescription though after you use it for a while. It's the 5 or 10 times that cost that you lose in capacity, in your ability to get your work done. Every extra click, every after-hours chart, every patient call that you answer that should have been handled by your work with your patient with the EMR. It all adds up. So instead of giving you another feature comparison, I'm not going to do that. I want to focus on what actually matters. In this episode, we're going to cover the 5 non-negotiables every cash-based practice should demand from an EHR. And why the legacy vendors, the big boys, they avoid showing the actual clinical experience during the demo. The hidden cost of the software, they can't communicate a patient's health story. That's what's missing. And the question you should ask that sales teams never want to answer, because at the end of the day, the purpose of the EHR isn't documentation. The purpose is helping practitioners and patients understand the story. And frankly, and you know people like this, but the EHR shouldn't do it. The EHR doesn't know how to tell a story. And there's nothing worse than listening to a story from somebody who doesn't know how to tell one. But let me tell you a story. This is interesting. How can this kind of software help you to make the 1,000,001 diagnosis? Have you ever heard of extra memory Paget's disease? It's one of our patients, literally 1 in a million, like 300 cases in the US per year. I've never seen it before, but the Esprē software asks the right questions to build the story. So I can tell some things that other doctors, they'll just never be able to figure out. And if you hang with me in just a few minutes, I'll tell you how that worked out. How about that? The illusion that the HR industry sells is that it basically doesn't really have to do with the workflow. It's documentation. That's the thing. And it's not. And pretty much what happens is that most docs I know, they'll do their documentation. They might do a little bit in the mix of the visit, but mostly it happens after the encounter. And that's where they really spend a lot of time. And so the legacy EHR, it's not an interactive system. It's basically a filing cabinet. So you basically get your information, you shuffle it away. And what they do is they prove that you follow the rules so that you can bill. And when auditors look at stuff, you'll get your reimbursement. But that's not how functional medicine works. In a modern functional medicine practice, the thing that we're doing is we got this educated patient who they're doing their AI and they're doing their study and they're Googling things, and they come in and they want to be educated. They want to get your professorial opinion. So to provide them with understanding, that's the thing. Engaging with them and offering them something they can't get outside of that environment. So basically the reality is there's content everywhere. Everybody's like up to their eyeballs in content. They're drowning in it. But what they're missing is connection, right? So this visit with the patient, that is your intervention. You are the medicine. And if your EHR doesn't support that, with you, the patient sitting with you in the exam room, and really build that, you're just not going to have the practice you could. So this EHR was designed for the billing department. Horrible. It's the worst thing ever. So see, think about the doc who's choosing this big name EHR, and they've looked it up, and it's got great reviews. It's got tons of integrations, the best billing in the world, and everybody seems to recommend it. And then you put it in your practice, and suddenly screens and tabs and scrolling, and even to review one lab, it's a headache. I get them from outside EHRs, and I can't believe how horrible they are. You'll have page after page after page, and one page will have the acquisition number and this facility number, and then one line in that whole page will have the actual lab value. Great for billing, but for me to review it, I'm going back to my headache days before I learned about Esprē. It's terrible. I get those things, but it ticks me off. I hate it. It drives me crazy because the information isn't there. The thing I want to be able to boop, 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 and get that done, because the information is trapped in these silos, and symptoms are over here, labs are over there, treatment plans are somewhere in that mix. I see these all the time, not in my system, but in other people's system. And these notes are buried, and pieces aren't there that are supposed to be there, and there's no story at all. I see fragments. The patient sees tons of fragments. They get all sorts of junk in their portals, but nobody can see the whole picture. And then the provider's trying to explain it, and the software is completely nebbish. It doesn't help the tiniest bit. So the patient can't visualize it, and they've got all these reports, and they come in with reams of stuff, data, but nothing connects. There's no visual relationship. The symptom patterns are completely meaningless. There's no graphic stuff. It doesn't share, right? But the software made billing easier. Ta-da! Awesome. But it completely missed the mark, right? It's the thing that makes functional medicine work, is engagement and connection, right? And patients don't experience medicine through documentation. They experience it through understanding, right? Documentation is just something they kind of carry around in hopes that you'll make sense of it, right? That's what they come to you with, right? These big stacks or bags full of supplements or whatever. They want understanding. Think about your best patient visit. Sitting side by side, you're looking at labs, looking at symptoms, looking at treatment plans, connecting the dots. And the patient is incredibly grateful, incredibly happy. And they're going to leave. They'll tell your staff on the way out the door, by the way, that was the best visit I ever had. And then they're going to tell all their friends how great that was, because you actually showed them why a supplement matters, what difference does it make, why their prescription matters, why a biomarker matters, and what a biomarker is. I mean, LDL. Everybody knows that, right? It's lousy density lipoprotein. That's what we tell our patients. So they get the idea, and it communicates, and they understand how the pieces fit together. And that's when the patient stops being a spectator, right? And they become a participant. And the traditional EHR has no concept of that. That's a dizzying reality for them. There's no way that they're going to help you with that. It's a glorified note-taking system. They store information really, really well, but they were never designed to be shared, right? They were designed for providers to work behind a screen. Let's be honest, it's ugly. It's an ugly screen. It's not designed for either the practitioner by himself in the traditional sense to be able to enjoy it. It's ugly. It looks like a 1980 spreadsheet. And when you're evaluating EHRs, you want to ask one question first. It's not how many integrations or templates do you have or reports, but show me a real visit. Not your feature list or dashboard, your admin tools. Show me the encounter, the conversation. How does that work? What's the patient experience? Show me how you're going to show the patient how the labs and symptoms work together, and what's a treatment plan? What does the patient actually see? What does their visual experience look like? Like, what's their UI, right? What's their user experience? Can the patient see what's happening and understand their story, and can they visualize process and progress? Or did they leave confused, or do they actually understand more than when they arrive? Because we ask our patients at the end of the visit, is anything unclear? Do you have any further questions? And because we really seek to educate and get all that stuff handled, mostly no. There's a lot of no's. But if you're going to demo an EHR and they're going to say billing, admin, compliance, and trust me, that's going to be good for them because that's what they do. But the doctor-patient relationship is what actually builds your practice. And in a cash-based functional medicine practice, the relationship isn't the feature, it is the business. That is what's going to get you from start to finish in an incredibly joyful and actually financially really, really good way. And so that's going to take us to the next problem. Before I get there, I want to tell you about the extra mammary disease. So Paget's is really weird and rare. And so when people see it, what they do, it looks like a fungal rash. It looks like eczema or maybe like kind of a tinea, like in your groin. And so what they do is they treat it with a little bit of steroid. Typically when I see that, I'll use an antifungal, and typically it gets better. But Esprē asks the questions. In your history, have you had extensive use of antibiotics? In your history, have you had rashes and eczematous problems? And so it asks all these questions and it builds the questionnaire so that the answer you're looking for is, does this patient have the fungal problem? And if the answer in their story, no, they have none of that. So instead of pursuing that tinea problem, that they have a fungal problem, I can know from the get-go, from the very beginning, this is rare for this patient to have a problem with fungus. They don't have a fungal problem generally. Their physical exam doesn't really support it except for that rash. And I can know that when that shows up, that looks just like everybody else thinks it's a rash, that's just a little fungus, it's not. It's probably something more. So when I see that patient, I will maybe treat them one time for that, and then I'll immediately refer them or do the biopsy and get them checked, which we did. And we found the 1 in a million diagnosis. Why? Because I had the story, right? I didn't have to guess. Does the patient have this? Is that a problem? I would never assume that the patient doesn't have it if I didn't have the story in front of me, but I had the story. It was easy. I didn't even have to think about it. I already knew. They don't have a fungal predisposition. All right. So that's why having the story is so critical, not just because it helps you communicate, but I intervened early. Non-invasive disease like that doesn't kill you. If it's invasive, your chances are much less that you're going to get remission. So it's a big deal. Let's talk about why cash-based practices need a completely different system. So everybody compares the billing tools and scheduling integrations and patient portal, but here's the problem. Your evaluating software that's built for an insurance-based rhythm, it doesn't really exist in your practice. That's not how it works. Insurance medicine documents what happened. Functional medicine helps patients understand what's happening. What's the flow? The visit happens in a traditional practice and the documentation gets created, then coding, then claims and reimbursement. That's pretty exciting. Not only boring and unfulfilling, but it doesn't help the patient. So there's not one functional medicine practitioner who I think gets excited about that. So we follow a different path. So we engage with the patient, build trust, education, action, outcomes. And that's what creates, some people call it compliance, but it's basically loyalty. They agree with you. You created agreement. They'll refer their friends and you'll have a long-term successful practice. So the software isn't just an admin tool. And I especially want you to get this. It's really important. It's not a record-keeping system. It's a communication platform. Like any other, your cell phone or any other system that you're using to communicate, that's what your system should be. And every visit with your patient should strengthen the relationship. So patients should be able to see that their biomarkers are improving. If you're doing your job, they will, right? Their symptom scores are changing. Their actual quality of life, their patient-reported outcome scores, they're improving. And they can see that treatment strategy not only unfolding, but improving them. And they should understand why they're taking a medicine or supplement and why the plan matters. The question isn't, is my documentation perfect? The question is, has the software taught the patient enough that they're educated, right? It's not an extra, it's the thing. And it's not something you should delegate later, like they get a handout. Because nobody reads their handout, by the way. You're getting a phone call, right? What did you exactly mean on line 3 about that recovery process? That you're going to get the call. But if you've taught them before, cuts down on all that stuff. So does the platform help me teach or no? Does it create more questions that I have to answer after hours? I would posit that it does. And if your portal is mostly a place where patients ask questions because they're confused, your software failed. because your portal's supposed to teach, right? That'd be the best. All right, let's talk about the costs that nobody's going to show you. So in my experience, most practitioners start out buying software based on the subscription price. They look at, okay, how much is it going to cost me a month? That's the trap, because the subscription is the smallest expense. The real cost is your time. A cheap EHR costs 5 or 10 times more, not in the software fees, but in all the stuff you have to do because it's not doing the job you need. So practice buys a low-cost system. Everybody says, yay, we're onboarded. It's awesome. We're saving money. And then 6 months later, there's charts, if they were paper this big. Instead, there's lines and lines and lines and pages of dots you got to answer. And messages pile up, 25 pages of tasks. So guess what they have to do? Hire another employee, $3,000 a month, cheap. That would be a cheap employee. We have to pay more here. So suddenly your cheap system you bought for a couple $100 or $500 or whatever is now $3,500 a month. And the cheap system isn't cheap anymore, right? And if you want to add to that the actual impact on your patients with the frustration they have and the negative reviews they're giving and the lost opportunities that you have, then figure out, okay, so with all that extra time I would have, how many more patient visits could I do? Probably a lot. So if you have an extra hour or two a day, that's hundreds and hundreds of hours annually, hundreds of visits, thousands and thousands of dollars, right? And your staff, they're doing everything manually now and trying to find documents and trying to track labs and follow referrals. And that's the software's job. That's not their job. Patients aren't engaging. They don't understand. So they call, they message, they text. And a lot of time it's after hours, that's supposed to be your time, right? That should be done. And the hidden cost is confusion. And everybody's sort of in a chaotic state. And that's why people burn out, because it's just hard to do. And the most expensive outcome of all. So how much does this software cost? The real question is, how many clinical hours does this steal from you? And for me, if I see a patient and for some reason I have to do the history without software, it's probably a good hour. And I've done it for a long time, so I'm pretty efficient at it. With software, the patient's doing that, and I can review that in less than a minute, the entire history, and I can build on that history in detail. So how many clinical hours would be stolen if I see 5 to 10 new patients a week? So 5 or 10 hours, right? You do the math, right? So every hour spent fighting the software is an hour not spent seeing patients or studying, building programs. I had a study about extra memory packets. I didn't have that off the top of my head. It's a 1 in a million, right? No way. So I have to study it, but I like it and I have time, right? I can create content. I can grow relationships and spend time with people. So the comparison you're making about price doesn't make any sense. It's about capacity. Does it increase your capacity like Esprē does? Or does it consume your capacity like a documentation system that's a legacy EMR does? Which one is it? 5 non-negotiables. Vendors will show you 100 features. 5 actually matter and the rest are just noise. Number 1, and I think Esprē does this better than anything, a shared patient experience. The patient should see what you see. You probably are familiar, you may not be, maybe it's called open notes years ago, a concept that everybody gets the same information. But if the information is not designed for sharing, it doesn't really help. That 27-page chunk of paper that has 20 lab values total on it, that's not helpful. Patients don't want to watch you clicking around. That's not good. Functional medicine should feel collaborative, and it has to be, or you're not going to get the results you want, right? Patients should see their symptoms and labs and meds and supplements and treatment plans all connected, right? Not all separate pages that make no sense together, right? And when patients get that connection and they understand that you understand, what happens is that they participate at a much higher level. And they don't have questions because you've already explained it. And probably the most valuable currency in your practice is trust, and trust increases. Non-negotiable number 2, the long-term view. So functional medicine isn't about a snapshot and a silver bullet treatment, right? It's about trends. It's about the functional status of the patient. We tell people all the time, the trend in your life is if you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker, you're going to die. If on the other hand, you're getting weller and weller and better, you can't be getting sicker at the same time. That trend is critical. And patients need to see where they started and what changed, what's improving. And, you know, frankly, if they're not doing better, what do they need to do some work on, right? Static charts can't do that. But trend visualization does. So if there's graphic representation of that stuff, patients can get it. Non-negotiable 3, workflow flexibility. So no two docs work the same way, right? I have a lot of interest in functional medicine as it relates to stem cell therapies and hormones. Other people, they're all about detoxification. That's their thing. I think that's awesome. It's great. Gut health, coaching, longevity. But the software should adapt to you, not force you into a different workflow. So when you have a more rigid system that doesn't have the capacity to do that, you have to create workarounds, right? And then that stuff we talked about. Everybody's frustrated and burned out. So got to be flexible. Non-negotiable 4, the patient should be able to engage without actually having to call you, right? They shouldn't have to pick up the phone or call you or message you to get a response. The actual EHR should be able to work as a portal. So the relationship doesn't stop when the visit ends. The portal should educate and engage and reinforce and be easy to get to and be attractive. You know, actually great colors, good scheme, you know, it looked good. So if the portal becomes basically a text stream between you and the confused patient, it failed. Okay, it's really clear. If that's what you're dealing with, your software is failing. Non-negotiable 5. You know this, but I'm just going to reiterate. Less clicks, less screens, less friction. And if the information that you need can fit on one page, it should be on one page. Your job is caring for patients, learning what's a breaking opportunity in treatment or diagnosis, not running software. I mean, you got enough to do, right? So every demo you should ask, show me. Don't tell me, show me. In our practice, we put all of our labs on a big screen so patients see them, and they're huge. I mean, you can see them from across the room. We show the symptom clusters and the treatment plans. So if they can't show you patient-facing visualizations, if they can't show it to you, they don't have it, okay? So you really know if you have a huge disproportional mismatch where they've got this huge promise and this not so great system, right? They know what they're going to show you so that you'll be enticed, but they more know what not to show you, which is what we do because they don't have it. Most practitioners walk out of a demo thinking they saw everything and they didn't. What they saw was the high points of that system. And the first few minutes are going to tell you what you need to know about this. And this is, from my perspective, as somebody who's actually built and worked with software that actually does work, right? Their demo is going to start with, here's how we code and do claims and revenue cycle and compliance. And if you're looking for an insurance software to bill, that's what you want. That is not how functional medicine works. Functional medicine starts with, and this is how they should demo it, the patient. What's the patient's story? How do you build a relationship and create that relationship? Not how do you run your insurance claim. And when they say, oh, we do that, then just simply say, could you show me? That'd be really great. And this is kind of a universal. When they do a demo, where's the patient? I mean, is the patient engaged in that demonstration? Did they show a patient or the patient's experience? Not the portal, but the patient. Can they show how the patient engages and understands and gets educated? And if not, it's a problem. So you'll also hear, oh, it's not in there, but we can customize it. We can build that. Okay, sure. The average customization cost is incredibly high, $20,000 or $30,000, sometimes higher. Our implementation team is amazing. It's like, you shouldn't need an implementation team. It should already be there. You shouldn't have to develop software for somebody else. That doesn't make sense. It might sound great until you're 6 months in and you're waiting for the customization to happen or trying to get the money to do it. And you're building workarounds to create some kind of flow that you can work with. And you're fixing things and things break, and you don't want that. You shouldn't have to build it from scratch. Also, if your system has data, but you can't get it easily, the problem is most systems, they store the heck out of it. They've got tons and tons of data, but you can't get to it. Like that 27, 8-page lab thing, it's there, but you can't visualize it. Patients need to see quickly, what are the patterns and trends in relationships, not spreadsheets, right? Not pages and pages and pages, and finally, like if you feel like your job is satisfying the software, that's not a good deal. Extra clicks that you're saying every time that you do it, you just say, I think I'm done. I just want to go home. Lots of screens. You just got to jump through a lot of hoops, and you're not actually serving patients with that. You're serving the software. You don't have to do that. Functional medicine works through pattern recognition. So you need to see them, and the patients need to be able to see them. And when they do, they understand. And they partner with you, right? Patients come to you because they expect you to give them an answer that's going to work. But if you can create trust around that, the outcomes you're going to see are going to be amazing. So the biggest red flag is that the functionality, it's really the mission. Like, what are you doing this for? Why are you seeing patients, and what is it about? And if you're a functional medicine doctor, it's really clear. You want to help that patient understand and become healthy. You're not treating illness so much disease as you're actually creating health, right? So you'll want to ask yourself, does the software believe like I believe? Does it actually define success the same way I do? Because if the software, if it was thinking documentation's awesome, that's not enough, right? A good software like Esprē should be answering the question the patient understands. They've been given all the tools they need. It's really, really clear. They're totally different goals. So when you have a demo, bring a real patient case, not a hypothetical. Make them show you, how did this work with hormones and gut and supplements and prescriptions? And how do you graph labs? And if they don't have a good answer, then probably you want to look for something that's more congruent with the way that you think. Because that's what your daily workflow looks like. And there are 4 questions that expose this faster than anything else. And the things that the sales team doesn't really like to answer, because they kind of have a polished script and they can't really demonstrate real functional medicine workflows. So this is going to expose it pretty quick. Ask them, show me a real functional medicine visit, like the whole gamut. Like you're asking the story and getting the history, and what are your specialty labs, and how are you going to share that with the patient? Not the features or dashboard, not the workflow diagram. I want to see those things, symptoms and labs and meds and supplements and treatment all together, and how they connect and how you show them. Show me what the patient sees. And if they can't, they don't have it, right? 2, how much customization will I need? Like, what does your practice specifically need? Like, if you have a mental health guy who's working with you and you want him integrated, what's that going to cost you? How are you going to do that? Listen, because the more complicated the answer, the more expensive it's going to be. Warning, it's not going to work, right? Great software shouldn't require any customization at all. That should all be built in, right? Then you ask them, how many folks that you're working with do practice like mine? And ask directly, is it more large primary care groups or urgent care, or is it for functional medicine? Or is it a practice like ours? And if you're the exception, you're not their priority. So ask them, show me how the patient understands their health journey, not the reports or PDFs, not portal screenshots. Show me how the patient sees their progress and trends and how that all works and the rationale. Watch for phrases like, we can customize that. Implementation will help. We have an API. What that means is they don't have it, right? You'll be building it yourself. So legacy EHRs talk about records and transactions and counters, right? Functional medicine talks about education and coaching and engagement and outcomes, different language and priorities and different missions. So don't let them control the demo. Bring your questions, ask them early and directly. And if they can't answer, end the demo and look elsewhere. So real quick, there's 3 steps to evaluate that work really well. Don't base your purchase on the demo. It doesn't make sense. The right test is, does it improve the patient conversation? And you should be able to understand that it's going to do that. It, of course, is going to store information. I have a file cabinet from 1988 that does that. That's not going to do it. But can it help patients improve their health? So define your ideal visit before the demo. Like, decide, what would you love to see? What's your dream visit? How long is it? How do you actually review symptoms? How does that work? How do you put the labs of the symptoms and progress and treatment plans? What does the patient leave with and what do they understand? And if that ideal visit is there in that EHR, you should seriously consider it, because Esprē does that. It makes sense, right? Bring a real patient case. Don't accept the hypothetical. Real labs, real symptoms, real medication. Then ask, show me the visit, not the software. And how do they connect? How does the story unfold? And have them simulate it. Like, show me how it really, really works. Because a good software, they'll be able to do that. And the final test is just kind of measure the friction as they're going through this real process. Count how many clicks there are, how many screens. Do they have to work around to get to what you want, right? How hard is it to navigate? Because every unnecessary step creates friction, and it's going to take more clicks than, if it takes more clicks than you really want to explain something, the software is failing. It's not you. I think it's so common for people just to think, I just must be a spaz. I can't figure this out. That's not what it is. Good software is going to work for you and with you and make your job easier. I know it's hard to imagine because you probably haven't experienced it, but it does happen. Involve your entire team. So get your provider to identify the workflow, like what's happening in the clinical side. So look at the labs and file coordination. And the front desk looks more at that stuff that the average demo looks at, the scheduling and intake, that kind of stuff, onboarding. And then the leadership team, or maybe it's a doc and the business manager, looks at how are they doing reporting and the growth of the practice. But I'll tell you, if any of those parts hates it, it won't work. So before your next demo, write down your idea of a visit and bring it with you and make the vendor prove they can deliver, right? So patient story, communication, strength of the relationship, that's what matters. What if you're stuck with the wrong EHR? Because there's a lot of people trapped, right? They're burned out, charting hell, but you have options. You don't have to stay stuck. The biggest mistake you're going to make is not to switch, right? That guy with the extra mammary Paget's disease, you're going to be way too burned out and tired, and you're not going to have the data you need. It's not going to be there, right? So you could stay put temporarily, use what you have, make the best of it, wait for the contract to expire. And lots of practices choose that. I understand. That makes sense. Keep your current system, rule 2, bridge the gap. Keep your current system and add tools like you probably already have that improve workflow. Try to reduce the pain. Right? That makes sense, right? Or option 3, plan a migration. Probably a good idea. Don't think of it as you're turning one system off and turning another on, like overnight. That doesn't happen. Think of it as a transition. So you're going to start using the better platform. Keep the old one available for a little while because you're going to need to pull some data from that. There's stuff that no matter what anybody tells you, you don't migrate an entire system into another. It never happens. No system can do it. It doesn't ever work. So the way the successful transitions happen is you keep your old software open for a few months. And it's not so much the technology, it's that people just don't want to make the jump because it's not that fun. It's never fun to switch, right? But if you don't, every day won't be fun, right? Every day looks like frustration, workarounds, confused patients who are driving you crazy. Every practice has a few of them. Even I have a few of them still. It happens. A portal that's essentially worthless, the patients they complain about and hate. Software that fights you. And migration's a little bit of work, but it's temporary. It's a week or two that benefits you for the rest of your career. So before you switch, decide what you want, know what features you want, what experience you want, what kind of patient relationships you're trying to create, and what kind of practice you're building because of that. And if you're thinking, boy, man, this is exactly where I am. I'm frustrated. I got workarounds. Patients are like going crazy. They don't understand. You don't have to switch to more, but you need to know it is possible. And there's a great EHR called Esprē, and you could do it. So if any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever thought, I'd like to discover an extra mammary Paget's disease, you're weird. You're just really weird. But if on the other hand, you've thought, I could do my practice better. It'd be so easy if I had a really good software. Give Esprē a try. There's a better way. You're right. Because software should support your practice and the relationship with your patient, not get in the middle of it. It should help patients understand, help providers teach and grow. It helps everyone spend less time doing documentation and more time healing, and that's why we built Esprē. It's described perfectly the Esprē experience. Connection, engagement, It's for functional medicine and understanding. It builds better clinical conversations. And if you'd like to see what that looks like in your practice, try Esprē for yourself. You don't have to pay anything. There's no obligation. You just get to experience what happens when software is built around the patient encounter instead of the billing department. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening. I'm so excited you watched, and thanks. I'll see you in the next episode.